All right, get ready, everyone, because we are going deep into Formula One preseason, and let me tell you,
Yeah.
the excitement is already off the charts.
Yeah.
It's February 2025, and we're talking brand new reports, car reveals, and oh yeah, all the drama that comes with a new F1 season, you and I.
Yeah.
We're going to focus on Red Bull, their new RB21, and how they're gearing up for that preseason testing over in Bahrain.
Well, one thing that's caught everyone's attention is how Red Bull went about unveiling the RB21. You know, those initial photos they released, it was all shadows and strategic
Oh,
lighting.
yeah, I remember that. Like, they were almost playing with us,
Yeah.
giving us glimpses of the car, but not really showing us anything. It was genius, honestly. Generated so much buzz, got everyone talking.
Absolutely. A bunch of those F1 blogs, they even published those initial photos, and everyone was speculating about what was hidden in the shadows. But then, boom, a few days later, we get to see the RB21 in action on track during a filming day in Bahrain.
I know, right? Certainly, we're seeing the RB21 in full color, out there on the track. Sure, some angles were still kind of hidden, but you could start piecing together the design.
Absolutely. One of the first things that jumped out at me, though, was the front wing. It looks totally different from last year's car.
Yeah, I saw that too.
And the pontons, those side pods that channel the airflow, they seem way more tightly packaged. It's clear that Red Bull is pushing the limits when it comes to aerodynamic efficiency.
For sure. I mean, remember the RB20, an absolute beast of a car.
Yeah.
But it was also a bit of a handful to drive, especially toward the end of the season.
Yeah.
I was reading that Pierre Wash, he's Red Bull's technical director, he even said that they were really focusing on finding a good balance between speed and drivability this year.
Yeah. Well, they've got to tame the beast a bit. I think Wash's statement speaks volumes, you know?
Yeah.
It tells us that Red Bull has definitely learned from last year's challenges.
Totally. It sounds like they're realizing they need a car that isn't just fast in qualifying, but one that's also consistent and predictable over a whole race distance, right?
Exactly. And for a driver like Verstappen, who's constantly pushing the limits, having a car he can trust is absolutely essential.
And we can't forget the big story here. Verstappen is going for his 5th consecutive title this year.
Wow.
It would put him right up there in the history books
Mhm.
alongside the legendary Michael Schumacher. It's a huge deal.
It really is. I mean, just to even consider achieving that, especially in a sport as competitive as Formula One, it's pretty incredible. You need a perfect combination of talent, a strong car, and a bit of luck.
Yeah. And even with Verstappen, who many consider to be the best out there right now, it's still a monumental task.
Absolutely. And we can't forget, Adrian Newey himself admitted that they had their fair share of struggles with the RB20's handling last season. Even the greatest designers can't always predict how a car will actually perform on the track.
For sure. So the big question is, have they managed to solve those issues with the RB21?
That's what everyone wants to know, right?
Right.
Some reports have pointed out that Red Bull had some issues with bumps and ride height last season, things that actually affected their performance quite a bit, especially toward the end of the season.
Mm.
If they haven't addressed those issues, you know, it could really impact Verstappen's chances of winning another championship.
Absolutely. And we can't forget about those new FIA regulations on wings. They threw another curveball into the mix.
Yeah.
I was reading on one of the F1 blogs that Red Bull seems to be the team most affected by these changes.
Yeah, that's going to make things interesting. How they've adapted to those new limitations will be crucial.
You know what this means? All eyes are going to be on that preseason test in Bahrain.
Oh, yeah.
That's where we'll see how the RB21 truly performs, get a real sense of where Red Bull stands compared to everyone else.
Absolutely. Those 3 days of testing will be crucial for every team, but especially for Red Bull with all the changes they've made.
For sure. And with only one car per team, every minute on that track is precious.
Right. Data, analysis, fine-tuning. It's a high-pressure environment, that's for sure.
No doubt about it. Speaking of the preseason test, we got to talk about Verstappen's new teammate, Liam Lawson.
Oh, yeah, Lawson. He's stepping into the Red Bull family this year.
He's got a bit of a reputation, you know, a bit of a firebrand.
Oh, absolutely. I read on one F1 blog that they even labeled him controversial.
I saw that.
Yeah.
He's known for that aggressive driving style and isn't afraid to speak his mind.
Right, and you got to wonder how he'll handle that Red Bull environment, especially with their history of having a very clear #1 driver.
Yeah, the pressure will be on him to perform and prove himself, that's for sure.
No doubt about it.
Actually, I was just looking at the testing schedule, and it looks like Verstappen will be driving the RB21 in that morning session on day 1, and then Lawson takes over in the afternoon.
Interesting.
Yeah, it'll be a real baptism by fire for Lawson, that's for sure.
For sure. That split schedule is pretty typical for testing. Gives both drivers a chance to get comfortable with the car and work through any initial setup issues. But, they only have 3 days to get everything right before the first race.
Yeah, the clock is ticking, and for a team like Red Bull, with their eyes on the championship, every second counts.
Absolutely. It's kind of funny, this whole cloak and dagger routine with the car reveals seems like it's become a bigger and bigger deal in Formula One. The secrecy, it's like next level these days.
Yeah, for sure. It's like everyone playing a high-stakes game of poker, holding their cards close to their chest until the very last minute. But you know what? It works. It adds to the excitement and intrigue. Keeps everyone guessing, keeps the rumor mill going.
It really does. But hey, the intrigue isn't just limited to the cars themselves, right? We've seen some interesting personnel changes this year, too.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, Adrian Newey moving from Red Bull over to Aston Martin. Big
Wow.
shakeup in the paddock.
Wait, is Newey's move that big of a deal? I mean, yeah, he's a legend, and he's had an incredible run with Red Bull, but they still have a really strong design team in place. Maybe this is their chance to prove they can succeed without him.
You've got a point there. Red Bull, they've cultivated some serious talent over the years, and they've always been able to adapt and innovate. But come on, Newey's impact at Red Bull, it's undeniable. He's the guy behind some of their most successful and iconic cars. To say his departure won't leave a void, that's tough to argue.
Yeah, fair enough. But amidst all the talk about car design and team strategies, let's not forget it all boils down to the drivers, right? They're the ones who have to deliver the results on the track. And with Verstappen gunning for a 5th consecutive title, the pressure is on. Think he can handle it?
Verstappen, oh, he thrives under pressure. The guy's a competitor through and through, unyielding determination to win. But let's not forget, he's got a new teammate this year, and Lawson, well, he's stepping into some pretty big shoes. His rep as a bit of a wild card, that could add a whole new dimension to things at Red Bull.
Oh yeah, Lawson's arrival is going to shake things up a bit, that's for sure. One F1 blog I read even called him, and I quote, controversial. Known for his aggressive driving style and not being afraid to speak his mind. So how do you think he'll handle being Verstappen's teammate? Any chance we see some, let's say, fireworks in the Red Bull garage?
It's definitely possible, right? I mean, Red Bull, they've always had a very clear number one driver. And Verstappen, he's more than earned that status with his performance. Lawson, he's ambitious and talented, no doubt, but he's got to find a way to assert himself without, disrupting the team's balance. How he navigates that dynamic, it'll be interesting to watch.
Okay, we've been focusing a lot on Red Bull, but what about the rest of the grid? Any other teams or drivers you think could give them a run for their money this season?
The midfield battle is always a highlight in Formula One, and this year looks to be no different. We've got Alpine, Alfa Romeo, Haas, all showing signs of improvement. They could be the dark horses in the championship fight, you never know.
Alpine in particular. They've got a strong driver lineup with Gasly and Ocon. And let's not forget, those two, they've got a bit of history, a rivalry that goes way back to their karting days. I think those old tensions might resurface, maybe affect the team's performance.
Their relationship, oh, it'll be under the microscope, that's for sure. Look, they've both matured as drivers since those early days, but that competitive fire, it's still there. For Alpine, managing that rivalry while harnessing their combined talent, it's going to be a tightrope walk.
And how about Alfa Romeo? They've got Bottas, a proven race winner, leading the charge. Think he could be a contender this year.
Bottas, he seems to have found his groove again since moving on from Mercedes. No longer in Hamilton's shadow, he's embracing his role as team leader at Alfa Romeo. If they can give him a competitive car, yeah, he could be a real threat.
And we can't forget about Haas either. New title sponsor this year, refreshed driver lineup with Magnussen and the return of Hülkenberg. Could this be the year they break through and challenge for podiums?
Haas, they've shown flashes of brilliance in the past, but consistency, that's been their Achilles heel. Bringing back Hülkenberg, a seasoned veteran, smart move. His experience, his technical feedback could be invaluable for the team.
So let's recap. We've got the secrecy surrounding those new cars, a major personnel shakeup, a 5-time world champion chasing history, a new teammate dynamic that could be explosive, and a midfield battle that's shaping up to be a real nail-biter. Sounds like we're in for a thrilling season.
Oh yeah, Formula One, it's constantly evolving, pushing the boundaries of technology and what humans can do behind the wheel. And this year, with all these new regulations and the competitive landscape shifting, it's anyone's guess who'll come out on top. That's the beauty of it.
Okay, before we get too carried away with predictions, let's switch gears and dive into the technical side of things. What can you tell us about the RB21's design, specifically the areas where Red Bull might have made some big improvements?
From the glimpses we've had, it seems like the RB21 is more of an evolution of last year's car, but, with some subtle yet significant refinements.
Okay, so evolution, not revolution. But where exactly did Red Bull focus their efforts? Remember those onboard shots from last season? Verstappen was practically wrestling that car through every single corner.
Oh yeah, the RB20. It was notorious for being a handful to drive. I read in a bunch of those F1 blogs that Red Bull really struggled with bumps and ride height, especially later in the season. And if you look at the photos of the RB21, they've made some pretty big changes to the suspension and the floor.
So they really zeroed in on stability and ride height control. Makes sense. I mean, if Verstappen can really push that car to its limits without worrying about bouncing all over the place, he's going to be a real threat.
Absolutely. A stable car is a fast car, especially with someone like Verstappen behind the wheel. He can squeeze every bit of performance out of it. And it's not just about driver confidence either. It's about those tires. A car that's bouncing around, it's going to wear out its tires way faster.
And speaking of those new regulations, the front wing is another area where Red Bull's had to make some significant changes. It looks a lot simpler than last year's wing, which is super complex.
Yeah, the new regs are supposed to reduce downforce and make the cars less sensitive to turbulent air, which in theory should make for some closer racing, those old front wings. They were generating so much downforce, it was tough for cars to follow each other closely. Remember all that talk about dirty air?
Oh yeah, dirty air, the bane of every F1 driver's existence. So if these new regs work like they're supposed to, we should see more overtaking and more exciting battles on track.
Exactly. But Red Bull, they're innovators, right? They'll be looking for ways to claw back any downforce they've lost with these new regs. They'll find those clever ways to manipulate the airflow, even with that simpler front wing.
Now, there are a few photos floating around of that rear wing. They're pretty blurry, though. Hard to make out what exactly they've done back there.
The rear wing, that's a critical part of the aero package. It's one of those areas where teams can really set themselves apart. We'll have to wait for preseason testing to get a real good look at that RB21 rear wing and see what it can do on track. I bet Red Bull's got some tricks up their sleeve.
It's funny, people think driving is the most important thing in Formula One, but really it's all about the data. Every single lap, that car generates tons of it. Tire wear, engine performance, aerodynamics, everything.
Totally. Data is king in Formula One. It tells the team how to make the car faster and how to plan their race strategy. And this year, with that limited testing time, every bit of data is even more valuable. They got to make the most of those 3 days in Bahrain.
Well, it sounds like we're in for an epic season. A 5-time world champion trying to make history, a new teammate dynamic that could be explosive, a whole pack of midfield teams hungry to prove themselves, and of course a brand new Red Bull with all sorts of technical innovations.
The 2025 Formula One season is going to be a classic. I can feel it. We've talked a lot about Verstappen and his dominance, but could this be the year someone challenges him? Think about it. Lawson's aggressive style, NEWEY moving to Aston Martin. Could we see a real championship battle? Something to ponder as we head into this new season.
It's going to be a wild ride, that's for sure. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, but there's still so many questions. How will the RB21 perform on track? Can Verstappen keep his winning streak going? How will Lawson handle being his teammate?
We'll be keeping a close eye on everything throughout the season, bringing you all the latest insights and analysis, so buckle up everyone, get ready for the lights to go out and the 2025 Formula One season to begin.